Now, the South African Rugby Union's annual report for 2012 shows that full executive members of its executive council awarded themselves massive salary and bonus increases, even though the union suffered a massive slump in profits last year. So to discuss this further, I've got still Garth Theunissen and Jessica Hubbard from Finweek joining me at the desk, and joining the conversation, Ockert, the Villiers-Senior sports journalist at SAPA. Thanks so much for joining us, Ockert. So, Garth, you wrote the article, and of course the question is, how can you have an 87% drop in profits, bottom line profits, when you have a 107% increase in bonuses? It just doesn't add up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite a common theme in South Africa and I guess across the world, executive pay. The thing to remember is SARU is not listed, so I guess they probably don't have the same sort of scrutiny from shareholders that your average listed company would undergo. But just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, or doesn't mean that it's right. And to put things in perspective, look, I mean, I wrote the story, I looked at some of the comments under the story, and a lot of guys said, well, at least they made a profit. Fair enough, they did make a profit, but the profit slumped 87%. And to put it in a slightly different light, after tax profit was 2.347 million for the entire union. The bonuses were 1.591 million. So in other words, the bonuses, which appeared to have gone to just two people, were 68% of their profit.
Who are those two people? Do we need to talk about that?
Look, this is where it gets tricky, because SARU wasn't that engaging, but they've got 13 members on the executive council. According to the annual report, the salary increases, there's a separate item for full execs and a separate item for non-execs. What I reported on was the increases for the full execs, and according to Andy Colhoun, who responded to me in an email, there's only two full execs, and that's Yuri Roo, who's the CEO, and Baz Ladad, who's the CFO. So based on the info that I've been given, and based on what it says in the annual report, it seems like that 107% bonus increase went to two people. I don't know, I'm just not sure that in current times, when your union's profit's slumping, that it's a good message to send out to everyone when two execs get massive bonus increases like that. Do
they deserve those increases? I mean, when you see the numbers that have come through, how often do you deal with SARU, and is it true that it's very hard to get information like this from them?
No, they're actually, generally they're very, very good with their communication, and to be honest, my first reaction was exactly that they're making a profit. I think there's also been a lot of changes within SARU, change of premises, and they moved to new premises, which I would assume would also cost some extra money. There's also changes in the way that they restructure their competition. In the past, the hosting of Springbok rugby tests would go to the unions, to a host union. Last year they hosted the All Blacks at Soccer City or FNB Stadium, and that obviously would have cost the SARU some money to host something like that. And this year is also going to be a new change, where the hosting of these tests goes to SARU. So generally, I think Yuri Roo, since he started as the CEO of SARU, I thought he's done some great things. It seems like SARU is moving forward. But yeah, it sounds a bit.
But from what you've observed over monitoring SARU over the past couple of years, is this out of character for the organisation? Is it something which shocked you, or is it kind of acceptable, or you've seen it happen before?
That's a difficult question. I think I would imagine it's something that would have happened in the past. I think if you're looking at what the CEO has done, generally speaking, I think it sounds almost like deservingly that he got.
So you think he deserves pretty much an increase, but the question is, the quantum of the increase given where profits are, and that will be debated, but that's of course what the board agreed to, Garth.
Yeah, look, the board agreed to it, but remember the board is made of old boys club of all the rugby unions. I mean, they probably aren't going to argue against increasing his first his salary by 21% and his bonus by 107%. Look, I'm not a day-to-day rugby journalist. We received the annual report in the post. I went through the figures. I just looked at it and I thought, that's odd. Why would you increase your bonuses by 107% when profits slumped to 87%? And it's just pure numbers. To me, that doesn't add up as a financial journalist. I don't think it's justified. I think it sends the wrong message. And I just struggle to understand how it can be seen as someone deserves that sort of bonus increase when actually the money they earned the profit they earned went down. And on the subject of the South African-New Zealand test match at FNB, I don't understand why that single test match would be singled out from all the others that were hosted. And why would SARU use that as an example of why their costs went up so much? Because also, tickets for those games, and I didn't go to the last season's one, but I went to the previous one, they were exorbitant. I'm sure it cost me over 600 Rand to attend that test match. And it packed out something like 95,000 people times 600 Rand. It's a lot of money.
As far as I know, that test match was the only one that was hosted by SARU themselves and not by the other unions, by the unions themselves.
So this is the first one that's included in the change in
well, I guess for last year. I'm not sure about the previous years, but I know that one was hosted by SARU, so the cost would have been incurred by SARU.
But they also would have then presumably reaped the rewards of the very high ticket prices times 95,000 people.
That's right, yeah.
So, I mean, that's where, and I did ask them, I said, well, why did you single out that test match? And they couldn't tell me. Look, I agree, normally they are very open and transparent. I can only guess that they found this somewhat unpalatable and didn't want it picked apart. They're probably not used to journalists picking apart their financials, because most rugby journalists are probably more interested in the game. If I was
who's going to be selected for the next match?
Well, if I was a full-time rugby journalist, I probably also wouldn't look at the financials. But I'm used to doing it, so I just thought I'd give it some
perhaps, Ockert, maybe we need to look at how the industry is doing as a whole. How is rugby faring? Is rugby profitable? Because if it's going down, if it's struggling in this economic climate, perhaps these executive bonus payments were quite...
I think if you look at rugby in the past, your bigger unions or the money that SARU would pay for a lot of the smaller rugby unions that's not making a profit. So the smaller unions, you can almost say kind of drags it down. Whereas your big five or the unions that are involved with Super Rugby, they kind of bring in the money that.
What are the main money drivers for the unions, right?
That would obviously be broadcasting rights. So that's the broadcasting rights that they deals they make with, obviously, because it's especially the SANZAR deals, whereas South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia, they're a partnership within SANZAR, and they negotiate for TV rights for the Super Rugby season and the what do you call it, the Rugby Championship. So I think the next term, I think at the end of 2015, they're going to renegotiate the broadcasting rights and rethink the structure of the current competitions.
Just on the costs, I mean, you do make a good point about loans being extended to the smaller unions. They did mention that. The other thing is their total salary bill for all staff, not just the execs, increased 40% to 52.129 million for the year. So quite a big jump in overall salary increases. To what extent do you think that was to pay for Hanneke Meyer's contract, to buy out all his supporting staff who came over from the Bulls, and then of course Royce Erasmus was also appointed high performance director. Those guys wouldn't have come cheap. Do you think they formed a big part of that 40% increase?
I would imagine that would be a huge part of those costs or those increases.
Good appointments?
That's a different matter.
Let's not get into that, I'm joking. Sorry, yeah, on the numbers.
Well, I don't know if you can also include the rugby players as staffers if you look at that, but there's also another shift where the contracting players to SARU has also changed. We've got 15 contracted players currently. I think there's space for 5 more. There's also been changes with the way that players' image rights, how much they're being how much money they get back through image rights and appearance fees and that kind of thing. I know they also there's also amounts that they have to pay to unions for taking their players from the unions. So that will also depend on how much money that would have cost SARU last year, for instance.